Coming up next on Twitch, this week in computer hardware, the Antec LanBoy. It's like Legos for PC enthusiasts, AGP hardware upgrades, and power supply shopping help.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch episode 90, recorded October 7th, 2010. LanBoy or Legos? Welcome to This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton. Joining me, well, actually, I'm joining him because it's his podcast, people, the man, the myth, the hardware legend, Ryan Shrout from PC Perspective, PCPer.com. Ryan, where are you, man?
Where am I? I'm here. I'm still in northern Kentucky / Cincinnati. Unfortunately, we had a baseball playoff loss yesterday. Still a little bit in mourning for that, giving up a no-hitter to Philadelphia, but we get through it.
At least it was Philadelphia, not the Giants, because, you know, the Giants are going to blow it later in the season because that's what the Giants do. Sorry,
that's what the Reds do as well, so we'll see.
But the Reds have, yeah, I feel your pain, sir. I just wanted to take an opportunity to take a dig at the local Giants fans, since I'm now in the East Bay and am therefore an Oakland A's fan. I bleed green and yellow. Yeah, I'm not a huge baseball fan, so jumping from team to team is pretty easy. You have I was laughing. We had a great question on Texella this week. It was basically somebody's like, I think my motherboard is dead, and they asked us to diagnose the motherboard code that the little LED was flashing, and I'm like, you know, you need the manual, and you need to tell us the manufacturer, and you need a speaker because many motherboards still communicate in beeps. Have you ever actually had one of the motherboards that speaks, that has recorded, like, you know, there is no RAM installed? Have you had one of those go off on you?
You know, I never have. I've seen motherboards that had those features listed, and I guess I've never actually taken the time to test to see how they work. To me, I don't want a random robotic voice coming out at me telling me something's wrong. I'm okay with like a postcode. I understand the complication of having to look for the manual or look up the PDF on the website, so maybe it would be useful.
It is I'll tell you, it is the scariest thing on the planet, because we had somebody borrow the RAM out of a machine, and we didn't know it was a talking motherboard. We booted up, and it was literally, you know, all of a sudden there's a voice coming from the computer, not the speakers, not anywhere. Literally the computer is like, there is difficulty with booting, no RAM installed. And we're like, you know, because immediately the first thought, because we're rational, thoughtful adults, is demon seed. And then we realized that was the 21st century postcode, was not a series of beeps that needed to be deciphered, but an actual voice coming from the machine.
This is the future, Patrick.
This is the future. Scares the hell out of me sometimes. Which led me to is I was trying to figure out a good online resource for the fellow that emailed in, because as we were like, you know, you do this, you do this. We also found the epic, I don't know if you've ever seen this, the Tom's Hardware Forums put together a giant list called the System Won't Boot and No Video Output Checklist, which is everything you're forced to do. They do not post about any no boot, no video problems until you perform all of these steps. So, yeah,
I have not seen it. It sounds like a good. How long is the list?
Let's see.
We're talking 100, 200.
It's not too bad. It's 22 steps, and then about a 2-page quote from someone that walks through some of the finer points of the checklist.
It's not difficult to see why people who maybe don't build the computers very often and think about doing it see threads like that and kind of compilations of, well, one thing went wrong. Here are the 22 options you need to find out what you screwed up on. Why somebody might go, maybe I don't really want to touch that.
I just like the whole do this first, please. Do this first before posting here, which I think is a nice, clean, simple way for a forum to be friendly to people. But the System Won't Boot, No Video Output Checklist is awesome.
That's funny. That's funny.
Dude, you have... Is it fair to call this a monster case in there, or is it a more genteel and sophisticated the Antec LanBoy?
It depends on what you want to. what your definition of monster is. It's not huge. I'm going to try to show it off here on video as well. Let me see if I can do this. It's not humongous, but what
Legos,
it is,
dude.
It is it's kind of weird. It's basic standard size almost, but it's very, very unique in how it's built. It doesn't really have a lot of components that are fixed. Let me change camera angle here and see if this will give us a little bit more of a shot here. So what you're looking at is we're looking down the top here. You can see the graphics card and this kind of stuff, and you've got a door out here that kind of flips open, and you can see the hard drive in here, and it kind of all looks almost like a normal case until you realize everything that you see can really be moved around. If we open this door out now, it might fall off because it is also removable. This hard drive you can see has the SATA connections pointed out that way, and you can also see that I'm sticking my hand all the way through this computer through the back. Should give you more indications of how kind of customizable it is. And it's also kind of on this weird suspension system. You see how it's bouncy when I put some weight on it and that kind of stuff.
I see.
They actually have these rubber cords that have hard drive mounts on them that then suspend it, in theory, kind of like suspend the hard drive in midair. Our hard drive guru actually said this is, definitely don't do that while it's spinning. Yeah, don't do that. Don't shake it. But in a normal use case environment, it actually could dramatically help reduce vibration noise and ambient vibrations that filter up through the rest of the case. But you can also take this hard drive and you can spin it and have the SATA connections point that way or even out this way just by rotating the rubber cords on it. Actually, up here, too, you see these optical drive mounts. Normally, an optical drive would kind of stick out the front. You can actually have the optical drive stick out the sides.
Well, I like that.
Which is kind of interesting if you kind of have your case under a desk or any kind of catty corner area. Wow, I don't know how that came out. That you can have the optical drive, face any of those three directions. Here in the motherboard area, you can see we've got a bottom mount power supply, and then your motherboard components are all kind of installed normally. I know this is hard to see. This is as much as that camera will zoom out. But you can actually take the motherboard and power supply mount and switch them so that you have a top mount power supply and the motherboard brackets actually move down.
Oh, wow.
So you can adjust that if you want to as well.
I believe the quote in your article is 34,000 possible configurations.
Yeah, I don't know where they came up with that number. But
you can put a hard drive here. You can put a hard drive here. You can put a hard drive here. You can put a hard drive here.
I'd failed, whatever statistics or permutations classes in college to come up with that number, but somebody at their company did. And there's lots of, there's room for tons of fans. One of the more interesting aspects of the case is that they call it a positive pressure system. So now you know a lot about airflow and how cooling works in general. And the usual type of theory is you have cool air coming in the front, hot air going out the back or out the top, something like that. So you have air intake fans on one side and exhaust fans on another side, and that creates airflow through the system, cool air in one side, hot air out the other. With this, they actually advocate positive airflow in every direction, or air intake at every fan. It comes with 5 120 millimeter fans. I think it has support for 15, and they say even if you install all 15, they want you to install everything pointed inside the fan, and pointed inside the case, and that will create positive air pressure that will help keep dust and pet hair and that kind of stuff out. And they say it will provide the best cooling experience for a case that is completely perforated like this one is. We had a debate last night with me and some of the other editors talking about it, whether or not that was actually true. If having every fan point inwards was actually the best thing for cooling a system that might have multiple graphics cards and an overclock processor and that kind of stuff. Because if you ask Nvidia, who sells currently the hottest GPUs on the market today, they will tell you very succinctly that you need to have good positive or good airflow in your case, and it needs to kind of even revolve around the direction that the GPU fans are running.
Well, it was interesting. I had Kyle from Hard OCP on Texilla last week, and we were talking about the new Corsair water cooler, the AC70, and we were also talking about, I can't remember the brand, the cases he had, but he said it was interesting because these cases have two huge fans on the bottom that pull cool air through the case and down through the bottom.
The Silverstone Raven cases?
That's got to be it. It was interesting. One of the things about the HD70 that was so interesting is the water coolers. They actually want you in the maximum performance mode, which is pretty loud. It's pretty good. It's a big improvement over the HD50. It's a pretty solid water cooler. The block itself is much better than previous generations, although it's not a lot cooler than previous generations. But looking at the HD70, basically they want you to pull cool air in. A fan on the inside, a fan on the outside, and pull for the best operation to pull cold air in through the fan and then down out the case through some other vent. And It's interesting, there's a lot of ways to skin this particular cat, because depending on the cooler design, like they've basically changed how they do cooler testing to do actual in-case testing, to better recognize ambient air temperature and how that impacts it. So that Silverstone though is interesting because we always think like we have to have cool air in through the front and hot air in through the back, and we're going to do it this way. But I think it's always worth experimenting to see if you can skin the cat a little bit better.
Oh, sure.
I also may be optimistic that way.
Well, no, but what's interesting about the Silverstone case and the fact that the H70 is doing cool air in the back is that there's still an exhaust, right? In the Corsair example, what they recommend you do is have air intake on the front, air intake on the back for their water cooler, and then hot air exhausting out the top of the case. And then with the Raven cases, the Silverstone Raven cases, they actually rotate all the components of the system 90 degrees so that
that's the one that was so
the exhaust from your graphics card is actually pointed up as opposed to out at a 90-degree angle. So then that's why you have those two big fans at the bottom that pull cool air in from the bottom, and you kind of, their theory is you're hot air rises, you're kind of aiding the thermodynamic laws, and you're just basically helping things along as opposed to trying to force air in a direction that it might otherwise not want to go in. But you're right. There's all kinds of different ways now that people are doing it. And there was a quote in the chat room that I really liked from somebody that said this case reminded them of an ATX erector set, where it's just like there's a steel frame and there's all kinds of different stuff you can do here if you want to. It's in my opinion a little bit. It's a $200 case, which is kind of expensive for this size. But I mean, if you like customizing things and you're interested in seeing how you can change this airflow and how you can work with things, I mean it's unique, definitely. It comes in primary colors. It's custom configurable. If you're not secure enough with your adulthood to buy a set of Legos, you can buy the Antec LanBoy and get your customization on at least in 34,000 basic configurations. No guarantees you can build an actual, Star Wars stormtrooper out of this thing, but someone will do it. Before we get into questions, do you want to talk about Nvidia? Nvidia doing something no graphics vendor has done in a very long time. ... Yeah, this one's kind of weird. I'm not going to go. I could talk for an hour about this conspiracy theory behind this event, behind this product change, and that is that if you go to a Best Buy store starting the 10th, and actually they were selling them a little bit early, and that's why this news came out. Nvidia, you'll be able to buy an Nvidia branded graphics card, a GTX 460 or a GTS 450, I think, are the two cards they're launching with. And this is interesting because this is the first time Nvidia has ever done this in the history of the company. This is the first time they have ever sold to the consumer an Nvidia branded part. What they had always done before is sell either the card or the GPU itself to add-in card vendors, their partners, that would then either make the card, rebrand the card, make the packaging, make the deals with the retail outlets like Newegg and Best Buy and all these types of things. And then they would be responsible for sales and RMAs and all that other kind of stuff. And Nvidia kind of took we're going to design the chip. We're going to maybe design the PCB and the memory system for you and give you, here's the best case, what we think you should do with our product. And, then kind of go, at least in theory, hands off with it. That's how we got like the likes of the EVGAs and the BFGs when they were still around, and XFX and PNY and Asus and MSI and Galaxy and all these companies that basically sell NVIDIA GPUs. Now that NVIDIA is selling GPUs themselves, it creates this whole kind of was there an internal battle about it? Are they pissing off their add-in card partners? Are the add-in card partners going to be slowly shoveled off of the table, and NVIDIA decides they want to take this whole market themselves? There's a whole lot of if then else kind of going on with this.
Well, how much is we talked recently about NVIDIA's latest gathering, which was primarily for the financial community, was like, look at all these cool things that all of these industries that spend a lot of money, not consumers who are gamers, but industries, the medical industry, scientific, engineering applications for our card. Oops, did you guys lose me?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, I just had a giant green screen where you were. But, here they basically went to Wall Street. Hey, there's we generate most of our profits from this, area of the company you probably don't recognize. But traditionally, right, the rule of thumb was if you don't want to piss off your partners, you don't sell the graphics parts. So this sounds like NVIDIA is pretty much gunning to take care of NVIDIA moving forward. That's just how I see it.
It's hard to see it any other way than that, right? It's NVIDIA. When you talk to NVIDIA, they say, look, we're only doing this at one retailer. We're only doing it with a couple of SKUs. We're trying to preserve the benefits of our partners by charging more for our cards than what their cards are selling for. But I think my theory is like, look, the discrete graphics market is shrinking, and when these CPU GPU hybrid chips come out in 2011, it's going to shrink the sub $75 graphics market pretty substantially. And those are the majority of the cards I sell at Best Buy. And so NVIDIA is going to be like, well, if we used to sell 2 million chips at this price and make X profit, and then our board vendors made some of the profit as well. But if we're only going to sell 200,000 chips at that profit now, it becomes a much less less profitable venture. So
there's less cake. Let's eat it all ourselves.
Exactly. Well, that's an unfortunate part of being a company like Galaxy or EVGA, who's your sole source of income is based off of one other company. And that's why you see a lot of these companies kind of branching out and that type of thing. It'll be interesting to see what happens, I'd say, in the next 24 months or so. NVIDIA is in a very difficult spot. We've talked about it before with CPUs and the CPU GPU hybrids and the fact that they don't have a combination like that they can really deal with right now. So this might be one of the ways they're trying to cover their asses, so to speak.
And we should point out there's no reason not to buy an NVIDIA GPU. They're not going away. They'll still be around to support drivers, probably until about the time you want to upgrade a card and much farther beyond that. So don't stop buying NVIDIA because their markets are looking a little tighter. The email address here is twich, TWICH @twitch.tv. We got an email from Kyle who's looking to calibrate his monitors. He says, hi, Ryan and Patrick. I'm looking for a hardware monitor calibrator that handles multi-monitor setups under Windows 7 64-bit that is reasonably priced for a home user. I can't adjust the colors on my monitor close enough by eye alone. No, you can't. But it seems like the hardware is too expensive to justify. Am I out of luck, or do you have something that can help?
I don't know if you do this yourself. Do you have one of these types of devices that you use for this, Patrick?
I've used the ColorVision Datacolor Spider. I think they're up to the Spider 3 Elite now. I didn't know, is there any difference between multiple monitors and single monitor configuration? And we should probably take a step back and explain why you color calibrate a monitor, especially if you work in video production or you actually want your pictures to look like you think they're supposed to look like.
Right. Well, if you've ever printed something from, you know, if you ever printed a picture that you've been looking at it in your computer and then really wondered why they look so drastically different, you'll understand the idea of monitor calibration, and they have printer calibration, all this other kind of stuff. It's so that the reds match, the reds that you see on the screen match the reds that actually are printed, the reds that exist in real life.
Or some approximation there, right? Because they talk about the color gamut or the color gamma, which is this fascinating map of all of the visible colors to the human eye. And a monitor can cover a certain segment of it, and a printer can cover a certain segment of it. In high-end equipment, it can usually cover more. But you generally want what you see to look like what you print out, or what you see to look like, say, if you're a video enthusiast, you know, what the television standards are actually set for.
Right.
You had an interesting product I hadn't heard of before on the list.
I've had one of these for probably 4 or 5 years, if not longer. It's called the Huey Pro, Huey, made by a company called Pantone, that is well known for monitor printer calibration and all kinds of stuff, right? It's $99, and it's a little light sensor that has cameras on the inside of it and on the outside of it. And you install it. It's a USB device. It attaches to your computer. And the first time you install the software, you run it, you actually has little suction cups that you attach the device to the monitor, right? And it runs through, shows a lot of pictures. You'll see the little color bars. It's taking pictures of what's going on, and then it calibrates it to a certain color bright, or to a certain color temperature that you want, and all this other kind of stuff. I mainly used it when I started doing the multi-monitor thing, and it would annoy the crap out of me that the monitor on the left would look so different than the monitor on the right. Even if they were the exact same monitor and you went in, you tried to change everything with the menus, they were different. And even if they weren't, even if neither was correct, I needed them to be the same, because I wanted a web page on this side, the same color white, to be the same color white on this side. And you could do that with as many monitors as you have with this device. And actually, one of the other cool things that this device does is when you would think, well, you're done calibrating, you're done with the device. This actually has a little stand that sits on your desk, and it has a light sensor, and that, as it's brighter in the daylight, it will actually turn the brightness on your monitors up, and when it gets darker, it will turn the brightness on your monitors down to adjust for all the ambient lighting that is going on. It's actually one of the coolest things that probably I've had the longest, going from PC to PC to PC.
It's pretty slick, and all. I mean, I used to work. I started working in publishing when they transitioned from like literally wax paste ups that got put on a gigantic drum scanner or photographed. And one of the guys we worked with, who was an absolute Photoshop genius and an early desktop publishing genius, used to have a giant hood he would pull over his monitor and himself, so he could actually completely take the ambient lighting, such as it was in this miserable office we were in, out of the equation. Nice. Because, you know, it's funny, like, you don't realize the color temperature of the sun, the color temperature of the temperature, the lighting in the room shifts and impacts what you look at. I'm not going to mention color temperature Kelvin, because the sun kind of emits the same thing, but the refraction of the sun through the atmosphere, through the glass around, you can do some interesting things to that. Yeah, I didn't realize the Huey Pro is so cheap. $99 is awesome.
I actually have one for the house and for the office that, yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that, especially if you do multi-monitor, you know, even if you don't do video production or photo, you know, editing and that kind of stuff, if you have multiple monitors and you've ever like dragged a window across and between them and you go, wow, that white, that blue looks nothing like that, and you get attached to one and you don't like putting stuff on the second monitor because of how different it looks. I mean, $99, and it's lasted me 5 years. No complaints at all.
And Pantone, they define colors. They numerically define colors for the entire printing industry. So if they can't do it right, exactly. Daryl, this is a good one. An AGP upgrade.
Yeah. Every time you get something like this, I want to read it out here. It says, I'm recycling a 7-year-old Sony Vaio desktop as a home theater PC. It's running Windows XP. Well, it's running Media Center 2003, and he installed Boxy on it. It's got 3 gigs of RAM, and Intel Pentium 4 3 gigahertz, and 8x AGP GeForce 5600. It's hooked up to a Samsung 720p TV. It streams the vast majority of things cleanly, and apparently this show is fabulous on it. That's good. Does it make sense to upgrade the video card since I'm stuck with AGP, or should I just bank the cash and wait to get an entirely better system? Whew, AGP, that is going back. I tell you what, What I did was I went to Newegg, I searched for graphics cards, I did AGP, and I looked for the most expensive graphics card I could buy with an AGP bus, and the answer was a Radeon HD 4670 1 gigabyte card. That's actually not too bad of a graphics card. I would say that is comparable to a Radeon 5500 series today. It's not going to be super impressive for gaming. For video and all that kind of stuff, obviously it's not going to be a problem. Although he's already says it's streaming video just fine for what he's wanting to do. So if he's just looking for something that might get him a little bit more gaming power, this will do it, but only to a certain degree. And also, I think of. Go ahead.
Will the HD 4670, is it HDCP compliant? Will it do output to HDMI over the DVI? And will it unpack H.264 video?
It will definitely do the H.264 video.
Okay.
And it is HDCP ready according to the specs.
Excellent. So I can actually, like, if it's a home theater PC and everything's working, because it's funny, umpteen years ago, DVD was actually required a lot of computing power, and now it seems like a watch can play back DVD video with no problem. Yeah. But 1080p video, even high-end 720p video, if you're talking about H.264 or some of the move formats, can take a huge amount of processor, and then all of a sudden you get the giant howling processor, the fans are firing up, and upgrading the graphics card on that can be a really nice treat, because the processing it's relatively less. It's so efficient on the graphics card compared to doing it on the CPU, I think, on a lot of levels. That, to me, would be a pretty good reason to upgrade the GPU on a home theater PC.
Yep, I agree. This would definitely be the last thing I would do to this computer before donating it or chucking it or whatever you decide to do. Anything else? I mean, a Pentium 4 3 gigahertz is long in the tooth, to say the least.
But if it works, don't fix it.
Yeah, don't re-break it, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I was like, if the GeForce 5600 is still doing what you want it to do, fine. He never really presents or says that there's a big problem that he's trying to fix. But if he's just looking for more gaming power and the ability to do HDMI and HDCP, then that AGP Radeon 4670 might do the trick.
Yeah, I'm sitting there like Total Media 3 Platinum, which is my favorite Blu-ray playback application. Yeah, 2 gigahertz Intel Core Duo.
It's hard to see how those compare, right? Like, right. It's difficult to do, but it should be all right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I'm all for like making hardware last as long as possible. We got an email from Bob about the AFCI breaker issue. He says, we did not have a problem with our AFCI breakers tripping. And if you don't know what we're talking about, go download last week's This Week in Computer Hardware. Will explain everything. Actually, Ryan will explain everything, and I'll just sit quietly in the background. We didn't have a problem with our AFCI breakers tripping until our power company, PG&E, Go California, upgraded us to an electronic power meter, a smart meter, which are really creepy because it's essentially a computer network tied into your power meter sitting outside of your house. And I know somebody in the Bay Area is hacking those, and I can't wait to find out at DEF CON next year what they're doing. He said, we called and complained the same day as one of our breakers would not stay open. The power company came back out. They replaced the meter with an electromechanical smart meter, one with a spinning metal disc, and the problem went away. The power company electrician said the combination of the electronic meter, the AFCI breaker, and ground fault protected socket, our outdoor lighting is on this circuit, was a problem they were encountering occasionally when they upgraded from electromechanical power meters to electronic power meters. The main symptom being the AFCI breakers tripping. He said that just having the ground fault protected socket in the circuit was often enough to have this problem, and nothing had to be plugged into that socket. If their bathroom is on the circuit, or if a surge protector non-interruptible power supply is acting like a ground fault protected socket, this could be the listener's problem. So AFCI, it's really frustrating, right? Because the basic functions of a power supply seem to emulate the behavior that the AFCI breakers are looking for.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering if this is like, will they evolve AFCI breakers to,
I think what they'll do is more likely evolve power supplies.
Yeah, so that's true. So great. Well, you have a choice between like violating the code in your neighborhood surreptitiously, as electricians basically tell you, there's no fix for the AFCI breaker in your PC, or we all wait until there's some giant upgrade opportunity for hard. Yeah, hey, you know what? Obviously, this is an opportunity for power supply vendors to step up. While we're at this, I would like it to be silent, 99% efficient, and non-tripping of AFCI breakers. And I'd like it to come with a pony. Yeah.
We got an email from Tim who has, I think we got one more thing to mention about the scratch-off CPU issue, which if you don't know what this is, go back 2 episodes of Twitch and you'll know what we're talking about. Tim says he listened to the show and he had a couple people, he thought a couple of people were trying to get across something that Patrick and I didn't quite get. IBM on its enterprise hardware, the P-Series Linux, the I-Series, the Z-Series mainframe computers have had a very similar option to these scratch-off upgrades for years. It's called capacity upgrade on demand. And the basic idea is when you buy such a large machine, you get it physically filled with CPUs, 32, 64, 128 cores, etc., but only licensed to have the number you need at that time turned on, 8 or 10 or something like that. Then when you need the extra capacity, you call IBM, get a code, and it turns on while the system is live and it adds it in, memory, extra cores, all that deal. The basic idea is that you really only need to have an installer, an engineer on site one time, that you can turn it on at a moment's notice, and that yes, as I kind of came around to, you can buy it for a limited time in the enterprise space for seasonal or unexpectedly heavy workload periods, and then turn it back off again. Not an option that everyone wants to use, but it's pretty common practice. So really, Intel's only innovation is to put that into the consumer space.
Once again, Ryan and I are the frontline examples that the mass of the audience intelligence is smarter and more experienced than we are.
Always. Always. But good information. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of a wild. I am fascinated. I'm fascinated and curious.
It's interesting because we knew about, like, I knew about Amazon S3 or EC2, right? And those were services that kind of spawned new virtual servers when you needed it. I didn't know that kind of already existed in actual physical hardware. That, you know, IBM might sell you a system with 128 cores, but only have 12 of them turned on, even though they were all physically there, you know, something like that. But I guess it makes sense, so.
Hey, obviously IBM found the market for it. Speaking of emerging markets, or in the case of the whole scratch-off CPUs, not so emerging, apparently well entrenched in areas we are not familiar with. Martin says, I was wondering if you had some recommendations for cases with USB 3.0 on the front panel. I've found a couple, including the Cooler Master HAF-X, aka the Half-X, but cannot find a good way to search for this feature, as most sites, including Newegg, do not allow to filter by USB 3.0. Are there going to be more cases with this feature in the near future? I can most assuredly say yes. There will be more cases with USB 3.0 in the future. How near it will be is probably, I would say it's going to become a lot more common in 2011, ... Sure. But you're welcome to the painful world of the early adopter, Martin.
The trick is, unfortunately, motherboards that have USB 3.0 don't have, you know how you're used to on the front of, when you install the USB front panel, on typical cases, there's like a little header on the motherboard, you know, a 9-pin header, I think, that you plug in, and there's connections on the case that just automatically plug into basically every motherboard on the market today. The problem is there's no standard for that for USB 3 yet. And any headers, there's no motherboards that have USB 3.0 headers on them anyway, and the case manufacturers that I talked to basically didn't know what to do. They were like, well, we don't want to put just anything on there, but we want to offer the feature. And unfortunately, the hack is one of these. And this is this LanBoy Air case we talked about at the beginning of the show has a USB 3.0 port on the front of it. And the way that all these vendors are doing this now is they basically, when your normal front panel connections, there's a USB cable that looks just like a USB cable. What you actually do is you feed it out the back of the case, and you plug it, you take it out the back and plug it into the motherboard, into one of the USB 3.0 ports on the back of the motherboard. So you're basically actually just transporting one of the USB 3.0 ports from the back of the case to the front of the case, which is still useful, but maybe not ideal.
It's not quite ghetto because the company is doing it for you, but it's in the neighborhood of it. I will say one of the things you can do when you're searching on Tiger Direct or Newegg is search for USB 3.0. And then on Tiger Direct, they actually have a category where you can do computer cases, full tower cases, stuff like that. And Newegg, you can also search for USB 3.0. And then on the thing on the left side that comes down, if you scroll down, you can actually again select computer cases as a subgenre of USB 3.0. So I am a search monster. So I just want you to know, Martin, you can do it, man. You just gotta kind of do a two-stage search methodology on that one.
So okay, so you search for USB 3, and then you divide that into a subcategory of computer cases. So they actually list like 13 cases then, more than I would have thought.
Yeah, I actually was surprised at how many. I was shocked that you couldn't, like, because I'm so used to hitting Newegg and searching the most generic term. So USB 3.0, click on the cases, computer cases. Yeah, Thermaltake Cooler Master Corsair, Lian Li. Ooh, Lian Li is a giant, actually an aluminum micro ATX desktop case in shocking red, which I'm actually now in love with. Inwin, Thermaltake, Antec. There's a lot of, 3 of those cases are the Antec LanBoy. There's a white Lian Li, another Thermaltake, and Aza. There's a fair number of cases out here.
Yeah, that's more than I would have thought. Yeah. And actually, one of those cool ones is a Thermaltake V9 that has hard drive docking bays built onto the top of the case, which is also kind of cool. But
wow, there's a 20. Oh wait, it's not a $25 case. It's a $400 Cooler Master. That's the half X with the 2 USB 3.0 ports on the front. That is an expensive computer case.
Yeah.
And I don't want to harsh out on Cooler Master, but this thing has a strong resemblance to something that would be sitting in the background on the Battlestar Galactica, which is my polite way of saying it looks like 70-year-old space junk. Not what I want for $40. Although there is a certain aesthetic there.
Exactly. Anyhow. It's all nostalgia. Let's see. We got another email from James about power supplies. He's saying, hoping you guys could tell me how to determine what size of power supply I should be buying and what sort of considerations need to go into that decision. I will be building a Sandy Bridge system when it launches and probably will use the built-in Sandy Bridge graphics for the first bit while later adding in a discrete video card. I haven't decided if I'm getting an unlocked K version, depends on pricing, but I will have the i7 line and probably have 8 gigs of RAM and SSD, 2 or 3 internal drives. So his question is, what range or size of power supply should he be looking at? The last few systems he has built have all used Antec Sonata case with the PSU that comes with it. Currently, I think it's a 500-watt power supply. Is buying too large of a power supply inefficient? I'd appreciate whatever input you can provide.
Oh, boy. Does anybody still do a proper, like, these are the components I'm choosing, this is how big of a power supply I need?
I think there are still, if you Google power supply calculator, there's one that we used to use or reference quite a bit. Let me see if that's, I don't know. There's several different ones out there. The issue is how frequently they were keeping up with the power supply or the power requirements for all these individual components. The initial specs that he gave, a Sandy Bridge processor, an SSD, a couple of regular hard drives. He says he's using the integrated graphics. I mean, you could get away with that 500-watt power supply and be probably more than okay for those components. The issue is he says he's going to add a discrete video card in, but he doesn't say what kind or what kind he would lean towards, a $200 one or a $400 one. You know, if you add in a GTX 480, for example, you need to prepare for 250 watts more power consumption than a system without one. So you need to keep that kind of thing in mind. In general, I say get more if you can afford it. It's not a big dollar concern for you. Get more power supply than you think you're going to need. It's not more. It's not inefficient to get a bigger power supply than you actually need. Power supplies are almost all power supplies you're buying today are 80+ efficient, meaning they're capable of taking 80% the energy from the wall and turning it into power inside your computer. And they're not sitting there sucking down power when your system's at idle and that kind of stuff for the most part.
This is interesting. I was looking at the Newegg calculator, and they just don't have an option for 12 gigabytes of RAM. They don't have an option for 4 CD-ROM drives plus 2 Blu-ray drives, nor do they have it's just kind of funny, like, yeah, buy large, deal with the pain later.
Yeah, I agree.
But the flip side of that is you don't need a 1200 watt power supply unless you're running like 3 GPUs on your dual Core i7 box. You know what I mean? Because I see people are like, I probably need a 1200 watt power supply, right? And it's like, the reality is if I've got 3 hard drives, 6 optical drives, and a decent graphics card along with my Core i7, and I'm running that off an 800 watt power supply, and I have a lot of overhead left over. So
right.
And when everything spins up on that, it gets a little crazy.
Nice.
So do we have Michael? Should we? Here we go. Jeff from Doghouse Systems. Hey,
go.
Ryan and Patrick. Cornelius here. Not from Jeff. Cornelius from Doghouse Systems podcast. Just finished listening to the latest episode of Twitch. And I wanted to mention an additional possibility for the sudden frames per second drop that a listener described. With only 2 gigabytes of memory, it's very likely that Windows is dipping into virtual memory and that it's the slow hard drive speed compared to system memory causing the decrease in performance. If the issue persists after adding another 2 gigabytes of memory, it is also possible that a solid-state drive would be a very worthwhile addition to help boost performance whenever virtual memory comes into play. Love the show. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Jeff of Doghouse Systems. I could have sworn I mentioned SSDs as being kind of a outer edge possibility of helping out with that. So. But I would definitely upgrade the RAM first and then start working around through the rest of the system, because it wasn't a bad system. Do you want to talk about Michael's SLI issue?
Yeah, let's do that. Michael says, like most of your viewers, I am in the process of building my next PC. That's good news for us. After hearing about the initial scratch-off CPU, we decided to go with an AMD processor and motherboard. I really would like to use a set of Nvidia cards with SLI. ATI with Crossfire is not a deal breaker since I only occasionally play PC games. My question is, since AMD owns ATI and will soon absorb its name, will I have any issues using an Nvidia SLI cards in the motherboard? Or is it all chipset driven? And this is something I had to ask a couple of people on staff at PC Perspective about, because SLI is obviously an Nvidia technology, and unlike Crossfire, it's not a free to use technology. Nvidia still charges licensing fees for this. In the AMD processor world, if you wanted to use an AMD platform CPU motherboard today, available, there are only 2 or 3 motherboards that will let you use SLI. Those are the MSI and ASUS Nvidia 980A chipset motherboards, and they're both good motherboards, and they're decently priced. I think anywhere from $120 to $140. The problem is, most people today, when they're talking about an AMD platform system, the exciting chipsets are the ones from AMD, the 890 series and that kind of thing that integrate SATA 6 and USB 3.0 on the chipset, on the motherboards, that the NVIDIA motherboards don't have.
Right.
Now, I do know there's one motherboard, and at least one more coming out, one from MSI, one from ASUS, that will use the 890 chipsets of AMD, and then we'll use the Lucid Hydra chip that we've talked about off and on the show, that will enable both Crossfire and SLI, as well as the Lucid Hydra multi-GPU technology. So if you look today, I think you can find an MSI 870A motherboard that will run SLI. Otherwise, you'll have to go to the NVIDIA 980A chipset-based boards, which is kind of a pain, and it's a little bit kind of aggravating because NVIDIA has really good SLI graphics options today, the GTX 460 or 450, and you can't use them kind of globally like you can with Crossfire. One of the things I think they need to fix.
I also got to say, I wouldn't take Intel out of the personal desktop market, or at least I wouldn't cross them off my list because of the Intel scratch-off CPU issue. I just want to say I love my Core i7. I've owned a lot of AMD systems. I've had a lot of happiness with them, but you know, I wouldn't cross running Nvidia cards and SLI on a Intel-based system just because you found the scratch-off CPU thing irritating. On the flip side, you know, that's how it's a free economy. Vote with your dollars. I'm just saying that's, you know, if I was going to go for AMD, I'd go for price performance. I'd go for, you know, because I want to roll with the underdog. I'd go with because I would like to have tighter integration with my GPUs that are made by the same company. Just wanted to say that.
Right.
Because people got really amped up about this whole, this is ridiculous, how dare Intel, and on the flip side is a lot of people are like, I think it's a pretty reasonable thing that Intel's experimenting with. I'm just saying, I'm not sure I'd use that. I wouldn't use that to cross a Core i5 or a Core i7 off the list, because those processors are pretty badass right now.
I agree. I agree. Are we
Felix
ready to close? Oh, go ahead.
Do you want to do Felix, or should we hold Felix for next week?
I think we need to hold some of these for next week. We've got too many more to get through here. So,
well, we're going to call it a wrap. That's This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton, and wow.
Where can we find you at? What shows? What URLs? What email addresses or Twitter feeds?
Well, first I want to say stay tuned next week for an outstanding question from Felix about a system upgrade scenario of 7 years, which obviously distracted me to no ends. I'm Patrick Norton. You can find me at Techzilla.com and HDNation.tv, where we talk about computers, technology, cell phones on Techzilla, and pretty much everything that touches your life that involves electricity, except, I promise you, for circuit breakers. And HD Nation, which is the podcast I do with Robert Heron, where we talk about home theater technology and how to make it look great on any budget, both the hardware and really cool HD content. You, sir, Ryan Shrout, can be found where?
PC Perspective is the website we run, does hardware reviews, PCPER.com, at Ryan Shrout on Twitter. I do promise Felix we'll get to his question next week. I figure if he's waited 7 years, 7 more days, probably not going to kill him. But we promise we'll get to the story of the 7-year-old. That's funny because this is the second 7-year-old computer question that we had and that we're going to have in the show today. Very ironic. Very ironic. But that's where you can get me at.
Yeah, my last $500 PC was it still runs, but I used it as my primary test bed for almost 4 years, almost 5 years. But 5 years is no 7
these days.
That's pretty awesome. All right, That's it for This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week.